Fellow Druids, the time's come to start our major competition, where we'll judge new techniques and name the Druid of the Year. And while the Druids are getting their magic potions ready, greedy eyes are keeping watch. Now's the crucial moment. The first contestant Druid, Killicatrix. I'll pour a few drops of my potion, and I make magnificent flowers grow out of season. How charming. Lovely. Hush, imbecile! What? You can be a barbarian and love flowers, can't you? Second contestant, Druid Barometrix. I'll throw a pinch of powder into the air and make it rain. Amusing. There are no seasons anymore. Druid Prefix. I've invented a way to turn soup into a powder that's easier to carry in little bags than in a cauldron. But you'd still need a cauldron to fix the soup. I've thought of everything, Venerable Elder. I invented a way to turn kettles into powder too. Bravo! Ingenious! Well done! All the rage right now is director Christopher Nolan's take on the Odyssey, a Bronze Age tale written towards the end of the Iron Age. Today, I'm going to be examining a similar historical epic, equal in grandiosity and scale, but set a little bit later, in the time of the Roman Empire during the conquests of Julius Caesar. Of course, if you don't know what I'm talking about the great Franco-Belgian comic Asterix and Obelix, or if you're French, Asterix et Obelix. Pretty sure that's exactly how that is pronounced. It is a very popular series that's run for dozens and dozens of volumes, self-contained graphic albums, and has been handed down from the original artist and writer to a series of new creators. Let's go back to the beginning. The story of these two Gauls that are fighting off their Roman aggressors, Asterix and Obelix. If this is your first time here, thank you for watching my video. On this channel, I am doing the Divining Comics Challenge, where I have picked 52 comics from across the globe and from across the history of the art form in order to expand my knowledge of the breadth and depth of comics as an art form. And I'm reading them all over the course of a year and putting up videos most every week about these comics. If you would like to join me, you can do so yourself. I've included all 52 categories in a link in the description of this video, so you can pick your own comics and tell me how your journey is going in the comments below. If you like the work that I'm doing here, there's a few ways you can support me. First, free ways include giving this video a like and subscribing to my channel. Those boost this video in the algorithm and make sure that you never miss an update. You can also find my writing over on spikestonehand.com. There I have weekly new comics buyer's guides, links to all of the big happenings in the comic industry, and a list of other comic book podcasts and YouTubes that I think might be worth your time. Finally, if you'd like to throw me over a few dollars over on Patreon, you'll get your name thrown in at the end of this video. But all that commercialism aside, I would like to extend to you a gracious welcome to my channel, Divining Comics, where I explore the magic hidden between the panels of your favorite comics.
Boys and girls, your attention, please. Presenting a new exciting radio program featuring the thrilling adventures of an amazing and incredible personality.
Asterix and Obelix was written by René Goscinny and drawn by Albert Uderzo until Goscinny's death, in which Uderzo took over the writing duties, and then he was the sole creator of this comic until 2009, when he sold the rights to Hachette Publishing. They've had a few different people writing and drawing them since then. Like I said at the beginning, we're going to the very beginning of this series, and it is I'm reading reading a Paper Cuts edition, a digital version. You can check out through Comics Plus if your library has it. It's got a lot of great resources that you can look at comics for free. This edition has the first 3 volumes of Asterix and Obelix comics. It's some of their first stories, and it tells 3 relatively self-contained narrative. So from what I've read today, I believe you could pretty much just jump into any volume and more or less be able to follow along. It doesn't seem like this is the kind of story with a tight continuity. It's always set in 50 BC, right after Rome and the Roman Empire has attempted to colonize Gaul, and these are the last Gaulish holdouts that are fighting their Roman imperial aggressors. So the 2 title characters that these stories follow primarily, Asterix is the little one. He is able to take a potion that makes him invulnerable and super strong, and he uses these powers to fight the Roman guards and fight other barbarian nations that they encounter on their journeys. Obelix is the big one. He designs stelae, basically these giant stone monuments that the Gauls use as religious symbols. I'm not really sure what exactly the history is there. If you're a guy who loves late antiquity and wants to tell me all about the Gauls of the 1st century BC, please do so in the comments. I love learning about that kind of history. The third most important character, not listed in the title, but very plot relevant, is Panoramix. He is the druid that designed the potion that gives Asterix his powers. I should also mention Obelix is also just as strong. He, as a baby, was doused in the strength potion, and thus he doesn't need to take it. They make reference to the fact that if you were to take it, something very bad would happen. That'd be kind of the one plot element maybe that gets resolved at some point, is what happens when Obelix does actually take the strength potion. But it's, like I said, pretty straightforward, self-contained. You get a few different narratives about them getting into hijinks with various Roman soldiers, with the neighboring tribes that aren't Gauls, and it's all resolved in 60 pages or less. It's pretty straightforward comics here. So the first story has Asterix encountering a Roman soldier who wants to learn the mystery of his magic strength potion. The second story has Asterix and Obelix journeying to a Roman town to find the man who makes the golden sickles that all druids use to collect their magic mushrooms. Not that kind of magic mushrooms, a different kind of magic mushroom, obviously. The third story has a neighboring barbarian tribe kidnap their druid Panoramix in order to have him make strength potions for this different tribe, and Asterix and Obelix have to go save Panoramix. If you haven't guessed by this point, one of the key features of this series is the naming conventions. All of the Gauls, for instance, have names ending in X. All of the Latins, the Romans, have either a combination of a real Roman Latin name or a very funny play on words. This is actually one of the most charming things of the series, is how goofy they got. Panoramix is just the start. Some other characters that we have in this volume are Tullius Octopus, Surplus Oproduce, Clove O'Garlix. It's a very silly comic, and in an actually funny way, unlike the Smurf comics that I read last week that I did not find humorous at all. This actually did get a bit of a chuckle out of me, though it does kind of raise the broader question I have of who the target demographic is for this series. A lot of the jokes would definitely fly over somebody's head if you were a child, for instance, and while, that makes sense to have all-age movies, right? Parents have to take kids to see the movies, so you might as well have a few jokes for them as well. Maybe, same thing with a TV show. Kids will watch it with their parents. You're not going to have as many parents reading comics to children, at least not in America. Maybe that is a bigger thing in Belgium and France. If so, please let me know. I'd love to learn more about that kind of culture. But, it seems like a bit of a strange touch here for these comics that definitely do seem aimed at kids, to have a lot of these jokes that only work if you're a little bit familiar with Latin or Latin sounding names, at least. Similarly, there's going to be a lot of different jokes based off of modern European anachronisms. For instance, a lot of the Roman characters will speak in Latin, and there'll be a little asterisk that translates it down at the bottom, and it'll be a modern aphorism rendered into pseudo-Latin. I mean, maybe it's real Latin, but, it wasn't a saying at the time, as far as I can tell. You have jokes like the barbarians that are clearly German-inspired, the Goths in this case. They all have their dialogue bubbles written in Fracture, the font. Just little things like that do make a more interesting work of art here, a more entertaining read, if you will. A lot of these small gags. And the stories themselves, I think, are very well paced. They're pretty propulsive in their plots. There's a lot going on at all times, and it doesn't kind of linger on any one beat or joke for too long. And other than that, I had a pretty decent time reading this. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I'm going to try and spin some gold out of the cloth here and make this video a little bit more interesting than me saying, yeah, that was fine, but apologies if I'm unable to do so. I think one of the most interesting things about this comic is the setting. This comic is written by Franco-Belgians, I believe. I think they're French-speaking Belgians, and it creates a unique perspective in history that as an American I never really got. Right? America likes to identify themselves with the Roman Empire. I think that's kind of a damning indictment on a lot of American culture, but that's just my opinion, if you will. But you don't get that same kind of perspective over in Europe, right? Because the various regions that the Roman Empire took over, colonized, occupied, demanded tribute from, all had their own cultures and histories and stories. And I think that there is a lot of movements that were designed to try and recapture some of that lost glory in a nationalistic sense coming out of the 1800s, the development of the modern nation state. It's France. Why wouldn't they try to reclaim the Gauls as their unique Frenchness? And they're trying to define a French state as opposed to, you have all these border regions like Catalonia that is a little bit France and a little bit Spain. It's kind of its own third unique thing, right? You get the same thing in northern Italy or in France and Germany's borders. I mean, even in the closest part of France to England has a little bit of a culture there mixing between the Anglos and the Gauls, right? And so they're trying to erase over a lot of those differences to create a unique French identity. And I think a lot of that does come through in this comic, right? When this comic is first being written in the late 1950s, early 1960s, we're going through as a globe the decolonial movement. France is losing a lot of its colonies abroad. The Battle of Algeria that has already happened. These movements across northern Africa, these French colonies post-World War II are demanding their independence and freeing from the colonial yoke. And by going back to this imagined past here of Gaulish resistance to the Latin invaders, in a sense, France is able to recast itself no longer as the colonial oppressor, but as a victim of themselves, right? And they're able to then tie that into the kind of French notion post-revolution, liberté, égalité, fraternité, except, of course, when it comes to the African colonies that we have, right? But, they're able to kind of respin that into the positive vision as resisting authority and resisting tyranny, despite the fact that they themselves historically were very tyrannical towards their colonial subjects. So Asterix and Obelix can kind of be read as part of the new France. What is France without its colonies? Well, let's go back to our essence, our history, the Gauls, just the way that various European countries did during the nationalistic movements. Like I said, France is doing this again in the 1960s as they try to figure out who exactly they are. And you also maybe even can get a little bit of some political satire here, given that de Gaulle is taking over the country. He's amassing power and amassing authority. These comics were written a little bit before the infamous 1968 in France, but that's kind of all in the ferment at the time, and there were Asterix and Obelix comics written during that era, and I'd be curious to see if any of that comes through, if this kind of more anti-authoritarian bent is there. Maybe if Julius Caesar becomes a more prominent character. He's in a couple of these stories very briefly, but maybe Julius Caesar gets recast in that kind of de Gaulle fashion. I'd be curious to see if anybody is an expert on these comics and could let me know if that something happens, if I'm totally off base here, if there's something interesting at this kind of nugget of what the Asterix and Obelix comics are doing and why they became so popular in France, such that they are still translated into America in the year 2026. That might be a little bit too much, might be a little far-fetched. Let me know if that's something that you like to hear more of from me, is kind of hypothesizing what these comics mean in a broader sense. So the two questions I always ask in these videos are, one, would I continue reading this series, right? There's, like I said, dozens and dozens of Asterix and Obelix comics, and I had a fine enough time reading these, but I will not be eagerly seeking out anymore. I think it's kind of like I said with some past editions. If you handed me one and I had nothing else to read, I wouldn't be upset. I'd probably have a good enough time reading it, but with the breadth of comics that are out there currently, I'm not champing at the bit to read more Asterix and Obelix. But if there's a volume that's a must-read and you got to read this one graphic album, please let me know in the comments below, and I will definitely check that out. Because, like I said, this was pretty good. It was very competently made. The art was, fun, little cartoony, and this gags worked for me by and large, so I had a good enough time reading this. Who would I recommend this for? Like I said, I do think this is the kind of thing that maybe is best enjoyed in that all ages setting. So maybe if you're a parent reading comics to your kids, reading comics with your kids as they learn to read themselves, I think this would be a good example of that. And if you are a history buff and you want a kind of comedic take on this time period to accentuate your historical research, this is a good enough take. It's just a fun one. Maybe you're a Latin teacher and you want to teach your kids about ancient France. Hey, this is there are worse things you could probably teach them and show them than these fun little comics. Thank you for watching this video. Again, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. But until next time, keep reading comics and never let the magic of comics die.
Old Enoch, he lived to be 365 when the Lord came and took him back to heaven alive. I saw the light from heaven shining all around. I saw the light come shining. I saw that light come down.